Welcome to the Get Sculpted podcast. We're your hosts, Tiana,
Jordana,
and Marilynn.
This podcast is all about cutting through the noise and giving you the real deal on fat loss, muscle building, and what it really takes to build your 2.0 sculpted self, inside and out. Our motto is to work smarter, not harder. We'll break down science-based and actionable strategies to optimize your metabolism, ditch the diets, and create a sustainable, fit, and healthy lifestyle that actually works for you. So if you're ready to get stronger, not just skinnier, and embrace a body you love, hit that subscribe button and let's get sculpted.
Hello and welcome back to the Get Sculpted podcast. It's Marilynn here, and today it's just me and you having a real heart-to-heart conversation about something that I know so many of you struggle with. And how do I know that? Because it is something that I struggled with personally for a very long time, and I still have to work at it at times, if I'm being honest. And it is that voice inside your head that tells you you're not doing enough, that you always fail at things, or why should you even bother doing this because nothing works for you? And for years, I used to let that voice run the show in everything I did, in my job, in my relationships, and in my fitness. And not only did I listen to that voice, but I believed it to my core, and I let it convince me that I wasn't good enough and that I was always falling short. But I am here to tell you something important, especially if you are hearing this voice in your own head. This voice that is called your inner critic, it is not the boss of you. And today, I want to help you take your power back by breaking down how to recognize this voice and shut it down, so that way you can finally move forward with confidence, not only in your fitness, but in your life as well. And this is a really important conversation because what you say to yourself matters probably more than you realize. So let's dive in. Just so we're on the same page, I want to start by breaking down what this negative self-talk is, because when you hear that inner critic, that is what it is, negative self-talk. Essentially, negative self-talk is this internal dialogue that makes you second-guess yourself. It makes you doubt your progress. It makes you minimize your accomplishments. And it can even say some really hurtful things at times. I want you to think for a second if you've ever had the voice in your head saying, I'm not making any progress. I'll never be able to lose weight. I hate how I look in these clothes, or I look disgusting in these pictures. These are all examples of negative thoughts that swirl around in your head, sometimes on repeat, multiple times a day. But what you need to know is that these thoughts, they shape your reality. So if you are constantly telling yourself that you are failing, that you suck, then you're definitely going to feel like a failure even when you're making progress. And if you focus on what you're not doing instead of what you are doing, then you're definitely going to feel stuck even when you're moving forward. And this is the biggest problem with negative self-talk. It doesn't actually reflect the truth. What it's reflecting is your fears or your worries or your insecurities. But the great news is, just like you can train your body, you can actually train your mind to think differently. And that's what I want to dive into today. First, I think it's really important that we break down the science, because you need to understand that this isn't entirely your fault. It's not a matter of you being too hard on yourself. Your brain is actually wired to focus on the negative. This is called a negativity bias. And it means that your brain holds on to bad experiences way more than good ones. It has actually been studied extensively in psychology, and the research shows that negative experiences are actually processed more intensely by the brain than positive ones. In fact, yes, I am a psychology nerd. I have a favorite psychologist that I love to listen to, Rick Hansen. And he explains it by saying that the brain is like Velcro for negative experiences, and it is Teflon for positive ones. So essentially that means that negative things will stick to you immediately like Velcro, and the positive things will slide right off just like a nonstick pan until we actively hold on to them. So the question is, of course, why does this happen? Why do our brains default to the negative? If you think about it and go way, way back, like I'm talking about our ancestors, they had to remember threats to be able to survive. So if they went out to gather food and almost got eaten by a bear, they needed to never forget that experience, so they would never make that mistake again. They were always on high alert because for them, it actually meant life or death in some situations. If you fast forward to today, even though we are not dodging bears or lions or tigers, our brain still treats every mistake or setback or bad day or negative moment think about missing a workout, overeating, or if you step on the scale and see a number you don't like, our brain treats all of those things as threats. And these things, remember, will stick to you like Velcro. But just as I said, the good news being that you can train your body through exercise, you can also train your brain on the positive, and you can learn to quiet that inner critic who's filling your head with negative self-talk. And this is going to allow you to start appreciating your wins and seeing your progress so much more. If you've been listening to this podcast for a while, you know that Get Sculpted, we're all about health and fitness, but it's important to understand how this negative self-talk actually shows up in your fitness journey. Because without realizing it, it actually could be one of the things that's holding you back from moving forward with your progress. And I know for a very long time, that's what it did to me. So one way this negative self-talk, this inner critic shows up is when you downplay your wins. So think about the last time you accomplished something with your fitness goals. Even if it's small, maybe you increased your daily step count or you lifted a little bit heavier in the gym. Instead of celebrating it, your brain tells you that it's not a big deal, or actually sometimes you might not even register it as a win. But when you ignore those wins, even though they might seem like small things, you are impacting your momentum. Because progress with your fitness, it doesn't happen in one giant step. It's all the small, consistent behaviors that add up over time that are going to lead to this transformation. A second way this negative self-talk will hold you back with your fitness is when you let one mistake define you. So if you are following a plan, let's say, and something unplanned happens or you miss a workout, odds are you're probably going to say to yourself, I've ruined everything. Or you'll stop caring and just, do whatever you want, eat whatever you want because, well, you've ruined everything. But if you put this in another context, it actually makes zero sense. Think about if you had a bad day at work. Do you just say, okay, I'm quitting my job today? Probably not. If you're drinking a glass of water and you spill some, would you take the cup and pour it on top of you? No, you probably wouldn't do that either. If you were running late for an appointment, would you just say, forget this, I'm turning around and going home? Probably not. I highly doubt you would do any of those things. So you need to start asking yourself, why are you doing it with your fitness? One choice, one misstep, it doesn't define your journey. It's always going to be about what you do next that matters the most. And a third way that negative self-talk shows up is when you get stuck in that loop of all or nothing thinking. And this is probably one of the mindsets that keeps so many women stuck. For myself, I call myself a recovering perfectionist because that's what I was for so many, many years, a perfectionist. If I couldn't do it perfect, I didn't do it at all. And I struggled really badly here because I truly gave up on so many things and thought, what's the point of doing it if I can't do it perfectly? But just as you've heard us speak many times, perfection is never the goal. Perfection, I actually want you to take that word and throw it out of your vocabulary because what we're looking for is progress. If you are holding yourself to a standard that is impossible to meet, you're backing yourself into a corner and of course you're going to feel like you failed. So instead of aiming for that perfection that doesn't exist, aim for commitment, aim for consistency. If you're working with a coach or you have someone you can speak to, aim for communication so you can get through those moments. Because even if you're taking steps forward, even if they're small, progress is still progress. So now that we know what negative self-talk is, and we know how it can hold you back on your fitness journey, we need to start talking about how you can stop it. Because just saying, think positive or you've got this and hoping for the best, that's not going to work. We're not about toxic positivity here. What you actually have to do is catch yourself when you're doing it. And you have to use real, practical strategies to retrain your brain so that inner critic doesn't control you on your fitness journey. So I want to give you 5 really powerful ways that you can use these strategies to put into action right away. So when you're done listening to this podcast, these are things you can action immediately to start fighting that negative self-talk. Strategy number 1, I want you to create awareness by catching the thought. So before you can even change this negative self-talk, you've got to notice when it's happening. Awareness is always the first step. When you catch yourself thinking negatively, saying things like, I look terrible, I always fail, I hate how these pants make me look, things like that, I want you to pause. And then I want you to ask yourself 2 questions. The first one is, would you say this to your best friend? Because if the answer is no, then I want you to think about, why are you saying it to yourself? And the second question I want you to ask yourself is is this thought actually true? Is there any merit to what you're saying? Are you always failing? Or is it maybe just how you feel in the moment? The goal here with these two questions, catching and then asking those questions, is to separate your thoughts from fact, because most of your negative thoughts are actually not reality. What they are your emotions. So something you can try is writing down your most common negative thoughts. So once you catch them, write them down and then ask yourself those two questions. Would you say it to your best friend? Is the thought actually true? And sometimes just the act of writing it down and seeing it on paper is going to help you realize just how unfair and how untrue those thoughts actually are. Strategy number 2, once you catch that negative thought, you need to reframe it into something more constructive. Now, again, we're not talking about that toxic positivity. I don't want you to lie to yourself. I don't want you to pretend everything's perfect, but you have to choose a thought that actually moves you forward. So let me give you an example. A negative thought could be, I always mess up when I'm trying to eat on plan. The reframe could be this: one meal doesn't define me. I'm learning how to eat with balance. You have to remember that your words matter. So if you start to change what you say to yourself, then it will definitely change how you feel. Strategy number 3, and this is a really good one. I think this is really, really practical. Start a wins journal and start training your brain to see the good. So it's kind of fake it till you make it. Remember, negative self-talk, it's like Velcro. It sticks to you, right? So if we let our brains focus on what's wrong instead of what's right, it's going to stick. So every day, I want you to try writing down 1 to 3 things that you did well, or maybe that you're proud of. And it can be anything. The smallest thing, like I drank an extra glass of water today, or, I got my steps in even though I really didn't want to. But every time you do this, you are rewiring your brain to look for positives. And this is going to create momentum, because when you see those wins written down, you are more likely to keep going. And more importantly, it starts to break that negative cycle by rewiring your brain, because you're giving your brain actual evidence that you are making progress. Because what you focus on is going to grow, and you have to train yourself to see those wins. Strategy 4, please practice self-compassion and talk to yourself as you would a friend. Years ago, when I was struggling very badly with this inner critic and negative self-talk, I was in therapy, and my therapist had me do a very powerful exercise. She had me say and write down in that moment all the things that I was saying to myself, all those things that were cycling through my mind about my body, my progress, what I thought about myself. Once we had that list, she told me then to take that list and pretend that I was saying them to my little niece, who was maybe 4 or 5 at the time. And I'm getting emotional right now because, let me tell you, I cried like a baby because I couldn't do it. I could not imagine saying those awful, hurtful things to my niece. And then my therapist asked me the $1 million question. If you can't say those things to her, why are you saying them to yourself? And that hit so hard. So the next time you catch yourself saying those negative things, I want you to respond by giving yourself that same kindness that you would give to someone else. And finally, the 5th and last strategy is I want you to zoom out and look at the big picture. When you are stuck in a negative spiral with your health and fitness, everything feels urgent and permanent. I can't tell you how many times I have heard a woman say to me, I missed my workout, so everything's ruined. My progress is ruined. But if you take a step back, does that one moment really define your journey? It doesn't. So instead of focusing on one small misstep and getting caught in that and then spiraling out of control, zoom out and look at the big picture of your overall progress and just get back to your plan. Because if you course correct and keep going, then you are moving forward. So if there is one thing I want you to take from this episode, it is this: your inner critic is not the boss of you, and you absolutely have the power to change the way you speak to yourself. And when you do that, everything in your fitness journey, but even more exciting, everything in your life starts to shift. And I want to leave you with something that I really wish someone had told me way, way back when I was struggling. You don't have to be perfect to make progress. There's no such thing. Remember, we're getting rid of that word. You don't have to listen to that voice in your head telling you that you are a failure. And you don't have to wait until you feel ready when all the stars align to make a change with your health and fitness, because you are ready right now. In this moment, And the only thing that is standing between where you are now and where you want to be is this story you keep telling yourself. So I want you to make that decision as soon as you finish listening to this episode. Make that decision right now to shut down that inner critic and speak to yourself with kindness and decide that no matter what, you're going to keep showing up for yourself. So this is my first solo episode. I want to thank you for spending this time with me. It means a lot. And if you found this episode helpful, we would love to hear your thoughts. So feel free to leave us a review, rate the show. And if you know someone, and odds are you do, that is struggling with their own inner critic, I want you to share this episode with them because I think it is so important to remind each other that we are doing better than we think. And next week, you are definitely going to want to tune in because you'll be spending some time with Coach Tiana, who is going to be talking to you about how she used her fitness to thrive through her sobriety journey. You are not going to want to miss it. Chat soon. And that's a wrap for today's episode of Get Sculpted. We hope you feel inspired, empowered, and ready to take the next step in your fitness journey. Remember, building your 2.0 body is a unique journey for you. It's about showing up for yourself consistently and not being perfect.
If you loved today's episode, don't forget to hit subscribe and leave us a review and tag us on social at getsculpted.ca. Your feedback helps us reach more women like you who are ready to cut through the noise and make lasting changes.
For more daily tips, inspiration, and behind-the-scenes content, follow us on Instagram and check out our handles in the show notes below. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time on Get Sculpted. Until then, remember this. Getting sculpted isn't about working harder, it's about working smarter.